Hey guys, I'm in a bit of a predicament, and the predicament is I've only read fan fiction for the past 2 months. And I was talking about this to my friend yesterday, and she said, hey, the new Emily Henry book just dropped. Why don't you try reading that? And the thing is, I have read an Emily Henry book before. I read People We Meet on Vacation, and I gave that book 3 stars. So I've kind of been hesitant, but I've seen that she's published in total, I think like 5 books with the colorful covers, and that's what I'm gonna do in this video. I figured why not give her books a second chance, and that's exactly what we're gonna be doing today. It's the next day. I just got back from work and I've read about 25% of the book already. I went into this story completely blind. I didn't read any sort of synopsis or commentary on it. The main plot of the story is that Daphne, the main character, has a fiance and he cheats on her during his bachelor party with his longtime girl best friend. And then she's the one that has to move out of the apartment because technically the place is in his name. And she moves in with the boyfriend of the girl best friend because the girl best friend also cheated on her partner with the fiance. So now there's like these two people, Miles and Daphne. They both got cheated on and now they're both living together. And it's very entertaining. I've only read about 8 chapters so far and I've been relating to Daphne a little bit more than I thought I would be. During the majority of her life, she has been moving from place to place. She never had like a fixed home because her mom's job required that they move a lot. And now she's a woman in her 30s. She still has a hard time making meaningful connections with people. You know when you read something that you've been trying to put into words for so long and it couldn't have been explained more perfectly than it has been. So the brief context is she's at a winery with a coworker that she doesn't really know that well. And they're just starting off a conversation and the coworker asks her a rather kind of private question, but not really. And now Daphne is internally debating whether she would give the superficial answer or the meaningful answer. Because while the superficial answer can just brush off the question and keep the conversation going, it doesn't really make room for meaningful connections. But then, if she answers with the deep, meaningful answer, it would require her to be vulnerable. It would require her to give information about her private life to someone that she doesn't really know all that well, and she doesn't know if she can trust this person or not. She says, "This is my problem. I don't know how to talk along the surface of things, but I also don't want to unearth the ugly stuff over and over again for people who are just passing through my life. It's depleting. Like every time I dole out a kernel of my history to someone who's not going to become a fixture in my life, a piece of me gets carried away, somewhere I can never get it back. You can't untell someone your secrets. You can't unsay those delicate truths. Once you learn, you can't trust the person you handed them to." As I said, during most of her childhood, she was always the new kid. She always had to pack up her bags and move to someplace else, leaving all of her friends behind, leaving every kind of meaningful connection that she ever made behind. It can be an extremely tiresome thing to have to constantly reintroduce yourself to people. As she said, giving pieces of yourself away and never knowing if that person's gonna take care of those pieces or not. So yeah, I'm really liking the book. Hi, let me set up the camera. So I just finished reading Funny Story, and why is it the best thing that I've read all month? Look, all I'm saying is that the book had no business being that good. On another note, I printed out more of these. I printed out some more pages so I can put them up on my wall. And now I'm just gonna sit here and cut them while I talk to you about the book. I do have one teeny tiny thing to say about Emily Henry's writing, and it's that sometimes her writing feels a little bit too impersonal. It's as if the feelings and the emotions are up here in the air. It doesn't feel like the characters are feeling the feelings. It feels like the character is talking about a feeling, if that makes sense. I need the characters to feel it in their bones. Fortunately, there's a million things that I did like about this book. Obviously, anything that I tell you about the plot is gonna be a spoiler, so I'm not gonna talk about what happens, but I will talk about the characters. Maybe I misplaced it, or maybe I just don't remember, but in no part of the book did we get a physical description of Daphne's, the main character's, appearance, which I thought was such an interesting thing to do as a writer, because essentially she could look like anything. No description of height, weight, hair color, skin color, eye color. She could be anyone. She could be you. But she's still a multi-dimensional character with a fully fleshed out personality. We might not know what she looks like, but we know about her fears, we know her interests, we know about her past, we know about her family, we know about her desires and her plans for the future. We know about her job that she loves. We know about the complicated relationship with her dad. We know about her mess of an ex-fiance. And I don't see this type of thing being used in traditionally published books. I mostly see this in like YN fanfics, so I appreciate what was done here. She can look like anyone. And I noticed that this is the same thing that Uncle Rick did in the new Percy Jackson book, because ever since the show came out, Rick didn't write anything about the trio's physical appearance, really, because they kind of all changed. I just think it's an extremely interesting decision to make as a writer, as an author, because you're kind of putting yourself up to the test. Like, a lot of people use their characters' physical descriptions as kind of like a clutch. Anytime they need to describe something about a character, it's the default thing that they talk about. Now it's kind of like a challenge. Can you write a decent book without mentioning physical appearance at all? I feel that it made a lot of more space for the author to show her sense of humor, because the banter between the characters was perfection. 5 stars for the banter alone. Actually, I didn't give the book 5 stars. I gave it like a 4.75, and I only didn't give it a 5 star because something, I mean, it's not a spoiler, right? I mean, you know they're gonna end up together. Like, it's a romance, like Doug. The scene where they're opening up to each other and telling each other how they feel, it felt a little bit, just a little bit too corny. I'm like, okay, I don't know, maybe it could have been said in a less cringy way. Let's just move on to the next book. So I've started reading Happy Place. I'm about 15% in, and I can already tell the differences. Some things that stayed the same: her sense of humor. I thought maybe that particular sense of humor was just in that character, but no, even though these are different books with different characters, with different life experiences, different interests, they still have the same sense of humor because it's the author's sense of humor. And I don't think I can necessarily blame her for that. But yeah, this is the first thing that I've noticed going into this book. Second thing that I've noticed, she described her physical appearance. Harriet has dark curly hair. That's all we know so far. But let's talk about the plot. From what I know so far, Harriet was engaged to Win. They called it off, but they didn't tell any of their friends apparently. So then one day Harriet is invited to go to a cabin with her friends, and when she gets there, guess who shows up? Win. It's one of those situations where Harriet and Win, they were in the same group of friends, so this was bound to happen sooner or later, and nobody knows that they called off their engagement, and they don't know how they're gonna tell their friends when they just found out that 2 of those people in that same friend group are also getting married. Apparently everyone in this friend group, they date each other. You know those weird friend groups in high school? It's a tight-knit group of people and they only date within each other. It's kind of incestuous. But yeah, there are 6 people in the friend group. 2 of them called off their engagement, Harriet and Win, and the other 2 are now getting married. And not only engaged, like they're getting married on the vacation. So now Harriet and Win can be like, oh, congratulations on the wedding. By the way, we broke up. So now they have to pretend that they're still together. And keep in mind, like, it's very noticeable from page 1, it's very noticeable that Harriet still likes Win. Apparently the marriage was called off over a phone call, a 4-minute phone call. Sounds like a Taylor Swift song. And they were together for almost a decade. So I hope that there's a damn good reason why they called it off. Because if this is some stupid miscommunication trope, I'm gonna throw my Kindle out the window. I'm a bit more than halfway through with Happy Place. I'm about 65% in. And I love getting into the psychology of these characters. Not giving any spoilers, but we're in Harriet's childhood home. And she's talking about her childhood and her family growing up. And the backstory is basically that her parents gave up all of their hopes and dreams in order to raise her and her sister. They had children pretty young, they dropped out of college, but they had to give all of that up. So Harriet spent her entire childhood watching her parents make sacrifices for her and her sister. She watched them stay together in a loveless marriage. And from what I gathered, her parents have this very traditional sense of what success means, which can basically be summarized into being a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. So when her sister decides to not go to college and go into cosmetology, she was the utter disappointment of the family. And because Harriet wants to be a doctor, which fits their very narrow view of what success means, they kind of put, I don't want to say pressure, but they definitely put all of their eggs in one basket. But Harriet feels this weight of wanting to succeed on behalf of her parents. Since her parents never got to achieve their dreams, it's her responsibility to achieve their dreams for them. And since she spent her entire childhood watching her parents make sacrifices, now that she's an adult, she has this self-limiting belief that her existence is an inconvenience, which explains a lot of the behavior that she has today. Whereas with Win and his dynamic with his parents, he kind of had the opposite problem. He grew up with everyone in his entire life, whether it's friends, family, partners. expecting absolutely nothing from him, as if he doesn't have potential to be anything more than mediocre. Whereas some parents put all of their hopes and unfulfilled dreams onto the backs of their children, whereas Wynn's parents don't really have the innate belief that their child could amount to anything at all. They don't think that he has the capacity, the ability, the talent to achieve great things. They just expect him to be mediocre and nothing more. And now, adult Wynn has an extremely low self-esteem and is constantly making self-deprecating jokes because he learned from everyone around him, parents included, that he's will never amount to anything. So yeah, are Wynn and Harriet a perfect couple, or are they a disaster waiting to happen? I still want to know why they broke up. 65% in, I still don't know, and I don't like when books do this. I get impatient and I get bored. I prefer it when the truth or the explanation gets revealed about in the 60 to 70% benchmark, and then the last third of the book or so, we can use it to now further the plot as a driving force until the end of the book. So yeah, I'm starting to get a bit impatient. I wanted to film this little clip before I went to bed. I finished Happy Place and I ended up giving it 3 to 3.5 stars. I didn't enjoy it as much as I did Funny Story. First, because I wasn't as engaged with the characters as I was with Funny Story. During the book, we get alternating timelines between the past and the present. The present being when they're already broken up, and the past being when they first started to get to know each other. And something that the author did that I didn't really vibe with was that in the past setting, I have this problem with telling instead of showing. So a lot of times what she would do is, instead of showing the two characters falling in love with each other, and she did in some instances. I'm not going to say that there weren't any instances of this at all, but what kept happening is that in excellent moments when she could have shown a scene of both of them together, both of them developing a connection, she preferred to have expository narration instead of dialogue between the characters. But still, there were so many moments in the past setting that felt rushed and clunky because I had a difficulty in believing in their connection. Because instead of showing me that these two characters are bonding and forming a connection, you prefer to just tell me, which is kind of bland. And again, not to say that there weren't any chapters, any scenes of both of them engaging and having scenes together at all. Of course there were. The argument that I'm bringing up is that there were so many opportunities wasted. Like, there were so many instances that more scenes could have been put in place of expository narration. And the third thing that really solidifies the 3 stars, and I can't delve into it because it's basically a major spoiler, but being as vague as I can, I don't like that at the end of the day, even if it was 100% her choice, I don't like the fact that it's always the woman that has to give up things in order to make the relationship work. Again, even if it was 100% her choice and it's her decision and this is what's going to make her happy and X, Y, and Z explanation, personally, for me, it's just something that I've seen like 100 million times over in my life, and I reached the quota. I've seen the same pattern play out in a million different ways. So maybe you haven't reached your maximum quota and you're fine with it, but every time I see something like this play out, I'm like, I immediately frown upon it. I don't care if it was her decision. I don't care if she's happier. I don't care. I hate it when it's always and only the woman that has to sacrifice something, that has to give up something in order to make a romantic relationship work. I'm sick of seeing it. I've seen it enough and I don't want to see it anymore. And now I can go to bed because my eyes are almost sealing shut. Hi. I know it looks like it's the same night, but it's actually been a week. And the situation is dire. I've been reading Book Lovers this entire week, and I'm still only at like 17% into the book. And there isn't any particular reason why, other than I'm fucking bored. I have a really hard time with the beginnings of books. Like, if it doesn't capture my attention in the first few pages, then I just keep on dragging it through until I finish it. Or until it actually does capture my attention, and then I devour it completely in a matter of days. But here I am, I'm almost 20% into the book, and I feel absolutely nothing. I don't feel anything good, I don't feel anything bad. I'm just completely indifferent
to everything that's going on. I don't care. I really don't care. I don't care at all. And I don't know if it's the writing. It feels a little bit more stoic than usual. Or maybe that's just a character. But yeah, we follow Nora, who's a literary agent. And here's the thing, like, this feels like something that I would like. It's a literary agent, okay, books about books. I'm interested in that topic. And she and her sister travel to a small town to spend like a mini vacation. And that's fine by me. Like, okay, a small town romance, I can get behind that. And the love interest is going to be Charlie, which is a person she's already met before, and kind of like a work meeting. My question is, what is Charlie doing in that small damn town? Because they met in New York. So what the hell is he doing out of all of the 50 states, out of all of the small towns in the entire country? What are the fucking chances of him being at the same small town and the same in North Carolina and the same like weekend as she is? Like, I don't know how much I can suspend my disbelief. And normally I really enjoy the banter between Emily Henry's characters, but it's not hitting for me on this one. And from what I see online, a lot of people had issues with the main character, Nora, and her personality and her character traits. So far, they're fine by me. She's just like a naturally serious person. Like, she's not whimsical. She's not a manic pixie dream girl. She's not gonna flop around. Like, she's a very serious. She's just like, it's her demeanor. It's like her personality. On another note, look at my wall. This took a lot more time than I would like to share publicly, but it was worth it. Okay, I'll update you when something actually happens. I recently developed a little system that I'm going to start applying next month to get me to start reading more books. And I'm going to start implementing them next month. And if you like it, maybe you can do it too. I like that I'm recording this because then it's a way that I can hold myself accountable. This will be on the internet, people will know, and thus I have to keep my word. And it's very simple. I essentially want to try to read at least one book out of each of these 3 categories. And maybe you have different categories, maybe you have other priorities. I just think that 3 is a good number. If I put like 7 different categories, I'm gonna get very overwhelmed and just give up immediately. First category is I want to read at least one nonfiction book each month. And I don't know how you see it, but like the common consensus of whenever someone says the word nonfiction, they think of this dreadful, super technical and complicated and uninviting piece of text. Basically, they think of a school textbook, but nonfiction books can be like a memoir. It's been a while since I've been out of school, and one thing that I want to take very seriously is that I still want to keep learning. It's not just because I'm out of school that I'm never going to learn anything new ever again. I don't want to become stagnant. I still want to stimulate my brain. I still want to learn new information. I remember being in my last semester of college thinking to myself, when I graduate, I'll finally have the time to learn about this and this and this. And it's been over a year since I've been out and I still never picked a book up. So yeah, that's my first category. The second category is books that I'm stalling to read. There are books in my TBR that have been there since 2013. It's the classic old story. Everyone has that book or many books that they said one day I'm gonna read, but you keep putting it off because it's not the right time. I create these arbitrary conditions that I have to be in order to be able to read the book. It has to be at the perfect time, at the perfect place, at the right moment. The weather needs to be a specific way in order for me to read the specific book, in order for me to have the specific vibe. And it doesn't need to be that way. It really doesn't, because now look where I'm at. And with new releases that come out every year, those books just keep getting pushed back and back and back. And the third and the last category is books that I want to reread. Recently, a friend mentioned to me the romance books that I recommended her some time ago. And looking back, the books that I recommended her at that time, I don't think I would recommend them again. And at the time, those were some of my favorites, which led me to think, do I have the same opinions on the books that I previously liked? Because in the past year, I think my reading taste has changed quite a lot. Books that I gave 5 stars when I was 17 and 18. And again, they're valid. They were representative of who I was at that time. But I want to see which books hold the test of time. I had like a little favorites shelf on my Goodreads, and there are like 7 or 8 books in there, and I haven't read those books in so long. I genuinely don't know if I would give them 5 stars anymore. And I think the main reason why I never go back to these books is because I always prioritize new books instead of books that I have already read. The time that I would spend rereading a story I already know, I could be using that same exact time to read something new and scratch off a book in my TBR that keeps getting bigger by the day. But that leaves me in the position that I don't know
if my quote-unquote favorite books are actually my favorite books because I haven't read them in so long. So yeah, those are my 3 categories. Obviously, if you want to start doing this, maybe you have different priorities, maybe you have different goals, but I think it's very doable. I think 3 is a good number. I can read 3 books a month. I think my biggest challenge would be motivation.
Can you believe that it's been another week? And just today I finished Book Lovers. And the only reason I can tell you this is because I had to listen to it on audiobook. I was at about 50% and I had to push through. I had to do something. And the crazy thing is, I can't even look at you and say that it's a bad book, because it's not. It's objectively not a bad book. In my experience, it was one of those stories that dragged on. And maybe that's just the nature of the story being set in a small town. You keep on living the same day every single day, and I felt that. I really felt that. But alas, Charlie and Nora are perfect for each other, and I am so glad that in this book, the woman didn't have to give up everything to be with her man. Nora was parentified at a very young age after the loss of her mother, so she was basically mothering her younger sister. She's always the person that tries to fix everything even though you didn't necessarily ask her to. One thing that bugged me though was that the book spent more time telling us that Nora was a sharp woman than actually showing her being sharp. Or maybe the book did show us that Nora was being sharp. I just didn't categorize it as such because I thought she was being pretty normal for her circumstances. And Charlie is your quintessential boy that grew up in a small town and wanted nothing more than to get the fuck away from it as quickly as possible. And I never related to anything more. So again, the book is good. I just didn't have a good experience reading it. So I'm gonna be fair and I'm gonna give the book 3 stars. And the next book on the list is People We Meet on Vacation. However, I have already read that book a couple of years ago and I'm not going to read it again because again, I did not have a good experience. What I can tell you is that I vividly remember being like 40% into the book and thinking, okay, when is the book gonna start? I felt like I was waiting for the car to take us somewhere, but the story took place in a parking lot, which is ironic because the 2 main characters are traveling together. So you would think, oh, since they're visiting all of these different destinations, you would think that there's a strong backbone, that there's a big story to hold up these adventures, but there really isn't. But to each their own. I know that this is kind of like a fan favorite out of her books, but it just was kind of middle of the road for me. The gist of the book is that Poppy and Alex were best friends for many years, but they haven't spoken in a while. They always used to take these yearly trips, but something happened a few years ago that made them just stop altogether. But this year, Poppy made the decision that for one last time, they were gonna go on a trip, and he takes her up on her offer. And when they get there, not only are they traveling, obviously, but they're also reconnecting their friendship. And we learn what happened. And if I'm not mistaken, it's told in a dual timeline. So we get flashes from the past and the present, and then you get to figure out what happened between them. But now the book that I'm most apprehensive to read is Beach Read, because not only am I the last person on the planet to read this, a lot of people call it her magnum opus. And considering my previous experiences, I don't know how to feel about it. Oh, and by the way, I gave People We Meet on Vacation 3 stars as well. So yeah, now I'm gonna read her last book, which is actually her first book, and hopefully it's not gonna take me 2 weeks to read this. So a few things happened. I spent the entire day listening to Beach Read on audiobook, and I'm almost finishing it, which is such a huge contrast to the 2 weeks that it took for me to read Book Lovers. However, one thing that I'm noticing is that every time I listen to a book on audio instead of reading it, whether it's a physical copy or an ebook, I don't feel as emotionally attached as I would have been if I read it with my eyes and not my ears. I don't know, I think it's just a format that allows me to tune out a lot more easily. However, when you listen to it on audio, I still think it counts as reading, obviously. However, I still need to learn or at least practice paying attention because it's a lot harder for me to not pay attention when I have the book in my hands. So yeah, I'm listening to Beach Read on audio and it has its perks and it has its downsides. And so far in my experience, this is looking like a 4-star book, which is still great. I'm definitely liking it more than I did Happy Place and People We Meet on Vacation. I still have an hour and a half left to listen to, but I'm gonna listen to it right now. I'm gonna finish it tonight and I'm going to follow along on my Kindle. And after I finish, I'll come back here, I'll tell you what I thought about it, and then I'll go rewatch Bridgerton. It's a couple of hours later, I just finished Beach Read, and I'm maintaining my decision on giving it 4 stars. Call me lazy, but I'm not gonna tell you the plot of the book. At this point,
If you've been on Book Talk or BookTube for one single day, you've seen this book before. You know what it's about without giving away any spoilers. One of my favorite things about this book was how Emily addressed the concept of there is no right or wrong way to feel about a certain situation. You are valid in your emotions even though they may seem contradictory, even though everyone around you is saying that it's wrong. You can be mad at your dad that just passed away. You are valid in your emotions when you say that you would get back together with an ex even though they cheated on you. I'm not saying it's what I would do, but it's okay to only want to remember the good parts of a person when they passed away, even though they did some fucked up shit in the past. There isn't one correct way to feel your emotions. Whatever which way you feel is a correct way to feel. I can see why people say that Beach Read is her magnum opus, because I think it's the most dense book out of all of them. It touches on so many different topics like childhood abuse, grief, cults. So this was a wonderful romance. But I am so glad that this was more than just a romance. So now we are at the stage where I'm going to rank all of the books and I'm going to tell you if you should read them or not. Okay, so from top to bottom, my ranking will be: first place will be Funny Story, second place will be Beach Read, third place would be Book Lovers, fourth place would be Happy Place, and last place would be People We Meet on Vacation. And you might be asking, wait a minute, why did she put Book Lovers in third place? And the thing is, by far, by a long shot, Nora and Charlie had the best chemistry out of all of the couples. It's undeniable, like the tension between them was palpable. And I think putting them in the middle of the ranking is kind of fair because they are my favorite couple. They are my favorite characters. I identified with them the most, but I'm not going to be unfair to the other books. I'm not going to put it in first place because I didn't have a good experience with the book. And also I'm not going to put them in last place because they were my favorite characters. And lastly, I know that I'm reading these books so that you don't have to, but if you would want to and you want help deciding which one you should read, here are my tips. Read Funny Story if you have daddy issues and if you used to move a lot when you were a kid. Read Happy Place if you have a friend group that is growing apart and if you are the daughter of immigrant parents. Read Book Lovers if you are a woman that has no desire to have kids and if you carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. Read People We Meet on Vacation if you want a Carrie Bradshaw-esque plot in which a single woman in her 30s can sustain herself in New York City on a journalism salary. And lastly, read Beach Read if you're either a hopeless romantic or if you don't believe in love. It'll work for the both of you. So that's today's video. Thank you for spending your time with me. This took a lot longer than I imagined. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!